I'd like to welcome you to a special presentation. It's a part of our self-empowerment series. This particular program deals with the tens of millions of Americans, actually hundreds of millions of individuals who suffer from some form of addictive behavior. Whether it's the 131 million overweight Americans or the more than 100 million Americans who've smoked, or over 250 million Americans who seem to be addicted to sugar. Throw in all the people who gamble, the people who drink, the people who take coffee, drugs, and who are workaholics, and you start to realize that many people suffer from many different of these conditions. Our program is called the 13th Step. Why? It is not to suggest that the 12 steps have not benefited people. Clearly they have. But based upon my own experience of having individuals in my own extended family who have had problems in all these different areas, and seeing their efforts of trying to rebalance their lives, and more often than not, the futility of it. And recently, one particular group down in Florida that is a halfway house for people who are trying to get back into society and recover. They've been to jail, or they've had broken marriages or lost their jobs. They've been alcoholics, or they've been gamblers. Whatever their behavior, they've been in trouble. And part of what they're trying to do is to be able to maintain a life that gives them joy and happiness. Knowing many of these people, I started to realize that the absence of a particular behavior does not mean that a person is happy, well. How many times have we had someone say, well, I no longer drink, but they drink coffee, or they eat sugar, or they smoke? I remember once going to a AA meeting with a member of my family, and I watched people smoke more cigarettes, drink more coffee, down more sugar, and were really just underneath the surface, rageful. And I'm thinking a program that's supposed to help people recover should also help that spiritual recovery. Now you talk about it, all the programs that have a spiritual component, and they should. But what happens when we want something, we try for it, and we don't get it? Then maybe we should re-examine where we're at. So the purpose of what we're going to try to do is look at life a little differently. First, I don't believe that anyone has a disease. I believe that's one of medicine's way of trying to pathologize conditions, that because so many people are afflicted, that we're saying that it is something beyond their control. How many times we've heard alcoholism's a disease, and now they want to make being overweight a disease, because once you make it a disease, you've pathologized it, then you have certain criteria that will diagnose it, and of course, medications to treat it. I don't believe there are medications for the spirit or the mind. I don't believe that there even should be considered medications for inappropriate choices in life. I believe we must start by asking ourselves a series of questions to which you will have your own answers. I'm merely going to give you some suggestions, but mind you, these are merely suggestions. It doesn't mean that they're the beginning and end of what you should believe, just to make you think. For example, all crises show us what we've avoided. Now think of that for a moment. How many times in a crisis, the crisis where you have a heart attack, you have a stroke, you end up one day, you're diagnosed with diabetes. That's a crisis. And you wouldn't have had that crisis had you not avoided a lot. Right? What if we avoid our happiness? What if we avoid our relationships, our body, our mind, our spirit, our finances? Growing old, losing a job, losing a loved one, death of a friend or family member, facing retirement. What if we've avoided our own growth, emotional growth, intellectual growth, creative growth? What if we've lived so much of our lives in very controlled standards, almost routine? Every day we do the same thing over and over again, and yet we expect a different outcome. How in the world can you live a life where you don't break the routines and break the habits and expect something to be fundamentally different? Well, what's not going to be different is how you feel, because you've given yourself nothing to rebalance what was out of balance. Disease just doesn't happen in the vast majority of cases. Disease is not genetic. Even when genes may play some role, it is the milieu in which the gene exists. So if I'm spending more than what I'm making, if I'm not able to save, if I feel that I have to have everything that comes along, then one day I'm out of balance financially. Now I may have things, and think of that. I have things I've made significant, but they're not. I've given them a value they shouldn't have. I've given them an emotional value. Oh, I need that car, I need that, and it's just a thing. That's all it is. Your life is more significant than anything you own, anything you possess, anything. Well, then comes the imbalance. You get something, you pay for it. Now, your money goes down and the anxiety level goes up because there must be compensation, and the average person compensates with stress. How many times do you see people, even here in New York City, we're filming in New York City, how many people living right here in New York City get up every day, go to work at jobs that may not honor them, but pay the rent, come back to an apartment that's really not a home. It's a place to live, but there's nothing that's warm and wonderful about it. It's a point of transition. But we never get beyond where we can just pay our bills. And yet then we lose the joy of living in a wonderful city, because New York's a wonderful city if you can afford it. And if you can't, then you're not going to the Broadway shows, and you're not going to a lot of the concerts, because a lot of the stuff New York offers costs. Some things don't. But then when was the last time you went to the Botanical Gardens in Brooklyn, or the Bronx Zoo, or the Cloisters? Really wonderful places that are unique in this country, that give this place its livability. More often than not, in downtime, people are so exhausted from the kind of work they've done that they kind of veg out or hang out with friends. So everything then is kind of a postponement to the when, if. Well, when I finally get financially secure, or when I find the right relationship, when I feel good enough, when I get my health back, when I have enough, money, when I have some friends, then I also, in other words, you're allowing your life to be put on hold until something out here is achieved. Then you will live the life that you feel you were meant to live. Does that ever happen? I know people that make a lot of money and still it's not enough for them to create the schedule that gives them the freedom, because they feel almost indispensable in life. Well, I got to be there. Why? Why? What value is it if without you, nothing works? One of the more humbling experiences of life is realizing that life will go on without any of us. Think of all the great and wonderful contributors to our existence, whether it's Muhammad or Christ or Moses or Buddha or Abraham or Spinoza or Gandhi or Martin Luther King. They all made a contribution, valuable, but they're all dead. Life goes on. Well, when did we realize that maybe we should appreciate the day we're in and take ourselves away from a scene for a moment and say, well, okay, I felt I had to keep working every single moment of every single day and always responsible for everyone else. Stop for a moment and see what happens. Life goes on. Sun's going to rise, people are going to go to work, and in the blink of an eye in universal time, we can be forgotten. And I think gnawing away at many of us is this idea of the impermanence of life, the impermanence of our youth, the impermanence of our relationship, the impermanence of our culture. My generation, the baby boomers, we grew up where our family believed in permanence. Those of us who had family that went through the Great Depression, they had so little, so they didn't believe in waste. They believe in hand-me-downs and eat what's on your plate. You realize they would say, there was a time when we didn't have food like this. We might go 2 days without eating, and they live with that. My generation, we've had everything. We've done it all, experienced it all, And then you stop and say, well, gee, you're kind of burnt out then, aren't you? And what you're seeing in America today is an awful lot of people who spend all their time on their family, all their time on their career, all their time on their success, creating something that is permanent, and they wake up in their 40s, 50s, and think, whoa, where do I go now? What do I do? I've done everything else that was supposed to give me happiness and fulfillment and my sense of self. We're so committed to our careers that by the time we're 25 or 24, 23 out of college, we don't stick our head up in the air to look around us at the world until we finally achieve something 10, 15 years later, till we finally feel secure enough. And by the time we stick our head up to look at the world around us, to actually experience life, to allow ourselves to be inclusive of life, to be open to other cultures and people and places and things without trying to dominate it or correct it, just being present for life. Do you know what it's like to wake up and be present for a person of another race, present a person of another religion, and to look at that person from love, not fear, inclusion, not exclusion? It suddenly makes us feel, where have I been? It's easy to be an intellectual spectator, one who listens to radio, even hip radio, even progressive radio, reads a progressive book, watches a progressive television program. We disguise frequently how out of balance we are by what we associate with. If I associate with a progressive cause, I must be progressive. No, not at all. How many times have we seen people who should be smarter than the choices they've made? How many people, whether it's conservative or liberal, really do dumb things? They also get overweight, and they get cancer, and they smoke, or they drink, or they don't stop and smell the roses. Well then, how smart are they if they're not smart about their own life? I know people can tell you everything about molecules and atoms and nanotechnology, and who don't spend 5 minutes with their children. They take care of their children, but not unconditional time. Just go to any resort in the world and watch how often people are sitting there at the beach with a cell phone. Is there something wrong with that picture? Yeah. It's out of balance. And without balance, the only thing that's going to happen when you don't have balance in your life is what? What?
Imbalance.
Imbalance leads to what?
Disease.
Conflict. Conflict leads to what? Disharmony. Disharmony is distress. Distress is disease. So just follow the chain of being out of balance to creating conflict from out of balance. Because if you can't pay your bills, the first thing you feel is what? Stress. And how do you stress yourself? What do you do when you feel stressed and you can't change what's stressing you? What do? You sublimate. And how do you sublimate? How have you sublimated? When there's something in your life you just can't cope with, something you can't change, where you feel disempowered, what do you do then? Food. Shop. Drugs. Eat. What? Chronic masturbation. We'll have to start a 12-step program about that. Think of all the ways that we keep ourselves busy. And what are we doing? Why do we sublimate? Why?
To escape.
To escape what?
The problem.
The problem. But what if the real problem is not the drug? See, in a lot of the 12-step programs, people get up and say, I'm an alcoholic. I've been an alcoholic for 13 years, and I've been clean and sober for 6 months, and I hurt this, and I did this, and I was stupid this, and everybody goes, very good, very good. I'm saying that the drugs, the alcohol, the gambling, the overeating, the obesity, I'm saying those are merely symptoms, not causes. I'm saying we shouldn't focus on that. We should focus upon what is imbalanced in the person, because if you see what's imbalanced, and you see what led to their stress, which led to their feeling of helplessness, which led to their incapacity to deal with something more constructively. So it's not a disease, it's not a pathology, it's an inappropriate behavior. It's the wrong choice. How many times in your life have you thought back and thought, God, why did I close that door? think of what you left behind with the choices that you've made. We've all done that many, many times. If only I hadn't said what I said. If only I hadn't done what I did. But you did. You can't change it. What you can do is not repeat it. Learn from it. And learn that the inappropriate choices you make are what creates the imbalance. The inappropriate choice to eat what you shouldn't have, to spend what you shouldn't have. If you know that an inappropriate choice in a relationship is not to communicate, then not communicating is going to get you what? What you fear. So what you fear is abandonment is going to happen, because at some point someone's going to say, hey, if you can't communicate, then we got nothing to share. So then embrace the problem. The problem is not out there. The problem is not who you've hurt. The problem is not hurting yourself. That's merely the end stage of a disease process that is the liver's disease, the brain's been hurt, but the underlying cause is not a disease. The underlying cause is inappropriate choices. Now that leads us to the idea that all these crises that leads us to inappropriate choices are preventable, every single one, if we know what to do. How often do you think you choose your crisis? Most of the times, right? But we don't want to acknowledge that, because what would happen if we had to acknowledge that we create our crisis? Then you got to take responsibility. And if you take responsibility, then what happens?
Guilt.
Well, you could feel guilt or shame, but you could also feel good about the fact that you're honest with yourself and realize that's not a choice that's going to get me where I want to go. So why not pay attention to the choices that get you where you want to go, right? Just think for a moment, where do you want? What do you want? Where do you want to be? What do you want to feel? Then that's all that you should put your energy in, because that's balancing. If I want to feel good, if I want to feel love, if I want to feel anything, I can't give what I don't have. No one can. That's why we have so few people who are willing to be unconditionally loving, open to a stranger, open to the world, open to what they don't know, instead of rigid and closed to what they don't know, fearful of what they don't know, intimidated by what they don't know. But if I feel unconditional love, and if I know how to hold that unconditional love in this moment and stay present with it, then I can't make judgments against other people. I have to look at everything with love instead of critical disdain. Now think what that would do if people were in conflict, look at each other with love instead of hate. When you look at someone with love, even people that have hurt you, people who've denied you, people that have been against you, what happens when you look at them with love? What?
They're just another being.
You see in them what you would want to see in yourself. Because everyone who's ever committed a bad act could also create a good act. We're all fully capable of being the best we can be. But if you're not willing to be the best you can be, then what you haven't discovered in yourself, how are you going to give it to someone else? So I've got to find my love before I can give it. And I've got to find my love before I can find it in someone else, see it in other people. So we're simply a lot of people walking around very frustrated. That's why we are sublimating. And we're drawn to people like us who may be in search also, but you really need to open yourself up and say, gee, I haven't found it because I haven't looked in the right place. If you're just looking in the emotions, you're not going to find it. You can cry all you want. You can confess all you want. It doesn't mean you're going to change anything. How many times have you heard people really get angry at themselves and apologetic, and everybody says, okay, never again, they say, and then they do it again. You know people like that? Been one of those people? I'm not going to do this again, and then you do it again. That's because you never surrendered that. You never touched that deeper self. In an absence of crisis, what do you pay attention to and what do you change? When there's no crisis in your life, what do you change? Nothing. Because now what you're doing, you're trying to stay safe. How do we stay safe?
Don't do anything.
Well, do only what you know the outcome of. Stay in predictable patterns. Eat the same food. Today I was in a health food store and I was standing beside a woman. I was near a deli and I was looking at all these wonderful gourmet vegan dishes they had. And a woman comes in, she looks and says, "There's nothing to eat here." And the woman behind the counter says, "We got 30 entrees and got a whole salad bar." "Well, you don't have what I wanted. You've thrown everything good away. I can't shop here anymore." And the woman says, "But ma'am, I'll give you one of these dishes, free, to try." No. So she went up and as she was leaving, I says, "Miss, I have a question for you. Why, with all those foods there, didn't you have any interest in anything that was gourmet, vegan, organic, living foods?" And the answer was simple. I don't like change. Now, the food that was there before, I had known for a fact was boring. They hadn't changed a single item in 7 years. It was tasteless. It looked terrible. Everything looked like, mud balls. And yet that was okay. But get something new, better, healthier. And she didn't want it. We're afraid of change. How often do you fear people who ask change? How often when we have an opportunity for change, we stop. We're afraid of what would happen if we really became our real self, where you might not know what the outcome would be. When you go to a deeper level of self and you're relating with the authentic self, you don't know what the outcome is going to be, right? But if you keep doing the same thing every day, you at least know what the outcome might be, or you hope to know what the outcome is. If you keep your hair the same style, the same clothes, eat the same food, you try not to have change. We're a society of gated communities. We're a society of barriers. We exclude people who are not like us. We only try to include people who are like us. That's not, where's the change? Where's the growth? Where's the balance? There's no balance in that. When everything is the same all the time, there's no balance. You're going to become imbalanced because of all the things you're avoiding and denying. It's like watching a person that will eat a vegetarian diet but won't exercise, or a person that exercises vigorously but won't take their supplements. A person that takes their supplements but won't meditate. A person who meditates but won't juice. A person that juices every day, taking their wheatgrass juice, but doesn't exercise, take their vitamins, meditate, because they think, oh, my answer's in my juice or my meditation. No, it's the totality of life. And almost always we lose our balance when we're not connected to the larger life. We become too small in our life. So sometimes it's only through a crisis that we change. It shouldn't be that way, because you can't always control the outcome of a crisis. One of the reasons that we resist change is the fear that the human resources needed to deal with change we simply don't have. How many times in life have you not done something because you just felt, I don't have the capability of it. I don't have the tools to do it. And then most people back off. And the older you get, the more likely it is that you're going to suggest to yourself, every time you have an opportunity to change it, you can't. Because you just don't have the money or the knowledge or the connections. It's kind of interesting. I believe there are two people in this world who make things happen: policymakers and opinion leaders. They are in the tiny minority of society. Probably in our society, you might be looking at maybe 6 million people out of 290 million people. That's a very small percentage. About, what is that? About 2%, a little less. But recently I was at a dinner party, and all the people at that dinner party, though they didn't know each other, had one thing in common. They were all successful at being highly motivated individuals. Within an hour of being there, it was just amazing the networking that was going on. How many people wanted to do things together, making deals with people. All I heard all around me was, oh, I do this, you do that, well, we could do something. And everybody wanted to work together because they all had something in common. They weren't afraid of ideas. They weren't afraid of change. They weren't afraid of taking chances. They weren't afraid of how much as a human being they could experience and explore and try. And all night long, that's all I saw. deals being made, doors being opened, because it's only policymakers and opinion leaders who are the primary door openers in life. They're the ones who allow someone to go from where they're at to where they need to be. Average people can't do that for you. They can appreciate you, they can't open doors. These people can. And then when you get to know these people, you realize how simple they are. They're very uncomplicated. Problem, solution. That's how they live. They're always in the solution. Almost everything they do is solution. The average person, however, is where? Problem. All they do is talk about the problems. Well, if all you can do is talk about problems and whine, moan, complain, or feel helpless, and you don't have the tools, so how can you change? How can you be healthy? You're not going to. And that's when, again, you sublimate your sense of helplessness. But as a society, we frequently avoid the very courses, the very classes, the very tutoring, the very much input that we need to feel more complete, to be enough, to do enough in our life to feel free of being burdened by fear and insecurity. When stability, security, and non-change, valued above all, do you trust change? Let me say that again. When you're into stability, when you're into security, almost everything you do is based upon security and stability, right? Non-change. Well, what happens when someone suggests a freedom lies outside of that? Now look at it as an example, your doctor. Earlier today, I filmed a group of persons living with AIDS. Some are in this audience. They all had the same thing to say, all of them to a person. They were suffering, they were fatigued and had night sweats and diarrhea and gastrointestinal trouble and pain, and were very fearful about dying. As one person said, I was 21 when I was diagnosed with AIDS, and I never believed I'd live to be 25 or see my 30th birthday. Now he is 34. So he said, I've been living with AIDS 14 years. He's doing a whole natural, holistic approach now. His muscle mass is back. He feels good. Each one of these 4 people that I interviewed today all had the same story. They're healthier now than they were before their diagnosis. Their diagnosis was a crisis that woke them up. It forced them to make choices. Now, as one said, 90% of all the people in his AIDS support groups are dead because they were afraid of change. They were afraid of anything different. Their doctors, to a person, they said, my doctor wants me on medications. My doctor is really not happy I'm doing this. And yet the person said, my blood chemistry, my killer cells are up, my T cells are up, I no longer have infections, I feel great, my muscle mass is back, I no longer have migraine headaches, I have a lot of energy. And I go in and my doctor sees that. And my doctor says, you should be on meds, you shouldn't be doing this. Now, there's something wrong with that, isn't there? If a doctor sees that you're alive and well and healthier than anyone else they're treating, who are all using his advice medications, and you're the person not using medications, and you're the person who's not sick, you're vitally well, wouldn't you think the person would say, well, maybe you've got a lesson that I should learn? Now go back. A person that doesn't want anything but stability. They've been given a cookbook of diagnosing and treating. They're reading from the cookbook. That's their holy grail. If you're a person with AIDS, you must take AZT, DDI, DDC, antiretrovirals, protease inhibitors. And you say, no, put down your cookbook. I'm not a disease. I'm not a diagnosis. I'm a human being. Look at me as a human being, capable of making change. That doctor can't see you as anything other than a disease that is not being treated properly. It makes no sense, does it?
Except for the insurance problem.
Well, yeah. So, but remember, that's one example of it. There's so many examples of what happens when we fear change. What is the benefit of facing and embracing our crisis? What happens when you face a crisis and you embrace it? What?
You take full responsibility and
You take responsibility and what?
you have to own up to your failure.
And you own up to your failure. But also you're saying, when I'm willing to face my crisis, my life is more important than my crisis. Do you realize what happens when you make your crisis more important than your life? Think how many people never learn the lesson that's on the other side of a crisis. Every time you start to go into the storm with lightning and thunder and drenching cold rain, you think, whoa, I hate being here. So you hunker down and try to insulate yourself because you are overwhelmed by the crisis you're in. And what if you kept going and suddenly on the other side of crisis there's a rainbow? We don't get to the rainbow. The rainbow is the enlightenment of what the message in the crisis is. The message is what redeems the crisis. If I learn the lesson of my crisis by embracing it, then I'm not going to repeat it. I'm free from that. Then you're not just free from alcohol, shopping, gambling, drugs, food. You're free from the whole need to make anything an improper choice to cover your anxiety and frustration. Because now you're going to be grounded. You're in the moment. Do you follow what I'm saying here? That's why we got to get through our crisis. And almost always we don't want to feel the crisis. It overwhelms us because we feel insecure about a crisis. We feel threatened that we're going to be considered less. After all, part of what happens in everybody who gains weight or goes broke is shame and embarrassment. The stigma that you're a failure. So who are you going to hang around if you feel that you're a failure and you don't want to be shamed?
People just like you.
Just like you, right. Who should you be hanging around? Just the opposite. We should have programs where if you come in and say, before someone says, I'm an alcoholic, say, you're not, you're just a human being. Right? You're just a human being who made some inappropriate choices. Now, what is the lesson of your crisis? Where's your rainbow? Explain what you've learned about your crisis so that the next time we're going to face stress and a sense of disempowerment, we won't revert to the same inappropriate choices. That is the kind of group we should be around. Otherwise, I don't drink anymore, but man, I kicked the cat and I punched the wife and I threw the baby in the dishwasher accidentally. And you start hearing the stories of what people feel. There's a rage. Have any of you experienced this? The rage that's going on? And why doesn't anyone acknowledge it? Why is there so little honesty about the fact that so what you gave up something? Big deal. You didn't change. Now, when you give up your anger and you give up your rage and you give up your insecurity and you give up your codependency being around other people just like you, now, then let me know about it. Because 95% of the people who go through this process end up right back where they started. So what was the point of all those meetings of this self-confession? Do you think you redeem yourself the more you confess? There's no redemption in that kind of confession. Be around people who are happy and joyful and loving and making proper choices. That's how you learn in life. I want to sit around a group of people who are smoking and drinking and angry and just because they acknowledge something, I say, yeah, brother. No, nonsense. And everybody's holding on. I just got to get through this day. Think of that. Think of the baggage when you say to someone, I just got to get through the next 24 hours. What does that do? Come on, what's that do?
Pressure.
Stress and pressure. Why? Because it makes it seem as if it is inevitable that failure is going to be there unless you get through this 24 hours. So immediately you put a barrier in front of you. I am a disease. I am dysfunctional. I am incomplete. So if I say the magic word, if I read the right affirmation, that maybe I can get through this day, but then you start all over again. You have to put up. It's like a gauntlet. Okay, I'm going to get beaten up today. I'm going to beat myself up today, and I'm going to keep thinking, God, I'd like a drink. No, you don't. Boom. Yeah, I do it. No, you don't. Boom. Just smacking yourself with one hand and smacking yourself with another. So you get through and they go, God, oh, glad it's 7 o'clock we got this meeting. Another day I didn't have a drink. How do you feel? Stressed as hell. I want to hit someone. Do you mind? No, we all want to hit someone. Let's hit each other. Okay. Instead of saying, I'm just a human being And today is going to be a wonderful day, and I don't have to think about what I'm not going to do because I'm focused on what I am going to do. And what am I going to do? I'm going to make right choices. And how am I going to make right choices? I'm going to understand what happens that allows me to make wrong choices. And that's where you're going to pay attention. I'm going to start living my life like it counted for something. And I'm going to redo my life so that anything that was not focused on is going to be focused. How many times do we give people only what we want them to see and experience of us, and we hide everything that we feel will be judged? Otherwise, if you don't take that approach in our society, and someone reveals themselves to you, then frequently we'll say no. I mean, let's say that you're a woman, and a guy says, we're first date, and yeah, my name's Bob, and I'm vegetarian. Good, Bob. And I like walks on the beach, and I like jazz Kenny G, and I like vegetarian food, gourmet, bubble baths with candles. Wow, Bob, that's terrific. And I'm very much a male feminist. Yeah, okay. And you're thinking, wow, what a guy. And I lie, and I cheat a lot, and I've got herpes, and I'm not going to tell you. And I got hemorrhoids the size of a baboon, and I'll hide them. And I'm impotent, and my legs are actually prostheses, and you won't know that, and for a while. And you're sitting there going, huh, he's a vegetarian, but he's a liar. Well, that doesn't balance out. And he's a pro-feminist, but he's a betrayer. And now I suddenly think, well, okay, well, I thank you for your openness, but I'm going to pass. So instead, we give someone a little tiny gold jeweled case, and in it's our life. We open up, oop, there's Mary, this is my life. What's Mary? Mary's pretty, Mary's compassionate, Mary's loving, Mary's caring. Oh, wow. Mary's a mistress, Mary's wonderful in bed. But Mary's also wonderful with children. Mary's Madonna, on one hand, the Virgin, and she is the compassionate mother, and she's the wicked woman. Ooh. And you think, wow. And she'll be there when no one else is. Oh, that solidifies it. And is a great cook. Whoa. And then you say, come on in, Mary. And 3 months later, there's a knock at the door. We got the rest of Mary's luggage. What luggage? What? You only saw that one little and then suddenly 3 tractor trailers of stuff come in. Mary's neurotic, Mary is psychotic, Mary's a manic depressive. Mary's got herpes. Mary's got 3 affairs going on the side. One with your brother, one with your father, one with your grandfather. Mary actually buys out and says she cooks. And you think, well, I don't want all this. And then the question is, well, look, you're going to start over again, you're just going to accept me. So we get to a point in life where we've committed ourselves to something and think it's just a hassle to try all over again. Okay. Let's just adapt to what we've got. Okay? So it's not the best relationship. So it's not the best job. All right, it's paying my bills. Hey, that's good, right? I can live where I want to live, standard of living. Yeah, but you're producing DDT. Oh, yeah, that's right. Let's not think about that. Right? But it's a multinational corporation where they don't really have human beings running it. They have kind of bottom line. There's a guy comes in every day called on the bottom line. He was actually born in a ledger. And so everything's a bottom line. It's impersonal, just like Arnold Schwarzenegger's character as his cyborg. That's how we begin to live when we adapt. Every time you adapt to a negative, you've imbalanced your life. Think of how many times we've compromised out of fear of what we would lose if we did not adapt. So we live in LA, right? Where no one has the same phone number for more than 28 seconds. And everybody's in Robert Redford's next film. And you got pollution that is terrible. And road rage. And such a lack of aesthetics. And yet because there's something there, you're willing to let all that be in balance. But it's not in balance, it's a negative. And then you compromise. How many times in life have we made compromises because we didn't feel there was anything else we could do? You're never better off because of those compromises. You're always worse off because of those compromises. They create imbalance, and the imbalance creates conflict. And then that conflict creates crisis. So at some point you wake up one day and you've got emphysema. Or you realize you just wasted 4 hours a day commuting everywhere. And you still don't feel good inside. Then what was the good of having one thing that you could accept and adapting to all the other things that you accepted because you couldn't change them? That's the negative of when you adapt. Instead of adapting to problems, transform them. Instead of adapting to a crisis, transform your crisis. It's only when we transform our crisis that we grow. And it's only when we grow through transformation that we understand the message of our crisis. Trouble is, we've been told we have to adapt, and we do. Do you realize how many things we do to adapt? What are some common adaptations that we do in our society? What?
Living.
How do we adapt to our living?
Settle for.
We settle for whatever it is that we can deal with in the moment, as if there's no other place that we could be. And then one day we go on vacation, we happen to go out to Colorado, and we're driving through the countryside, and we see people on a beautiful farm with horses and cows, and they're happy, and they got clear complexions, and they're not angry, and they can actually smile at you and say, what are they smiling at me for? What the hell is this, a cult? No, they're just happy people. Why? They have no right to be happy. Was John Denver happy? So we are suspicious of anyone who manifests something that we have refused to acknowledge we're capable of. But again, go back to what I said. You can't give what you don't have. And if we feel that we don't have the tools to feel open and flexible and dynamic, we're just going to adapt to everything. Now you're going to look at this and realize, how much does it cost to have that farm out there? You want to know something? You could buy 10 of those farms, what you could just a normal little old apartment on the Upper West Side. I know people living in Harlem paying more monthly rent than people living in beautiful Sedona. Yeah. And we don't realize that there's a whole world, but we've adapted. And then we adapt everything, we try to justify everything by rationalizing. Rationalizations become the first clue that you're adapting instead of transforming your crisis. Almost everything in our life is an illusion. We live by illusions. We just don't recognize the illusion. When I counsel celebrities, I see them without the makeup. I see them unglamorized. I see them without digitally corrected eyelids, where one is down, a drooping eye. And you think, wow, and they're getting all that money, and they're famous. If people only saw them the way they are. It's the illusion. We don't want to see them like that. There was once a very famous American classic actor, great English actor, and I was counseling him for his alcoholism. And I had him up at my farm upstate New York, and he was just sitting there on a bale of hay with me in a barn, and it was a summer afternoon, and it was raining out, and all the animals didn't like the rain. Goats and sheep don't like the rain. They were inside, and a little pony was inside, and we had a heifer inside, and they were laying right beside us. We were on a bale of hay, and he's just sitting back, and he's saying, wow, Gary, this is a life. This is a life. I said, why don't you take this life back home with you? I can't do that. Why can't you do that? He said, well, you have to understand. He said, people will not admit this, but everyone I know, he was talking about himself, who's a celebrity, they want to hang around other celebrities, not because they're particularly brilliant or likable, or you have anything that much in common with them, but because they're very insecure that the world, regular people, would recognize that they're not so much different from each other. And people don't want to see me mumble in my conversation, walk through the day like anyone else, slightly confused and on automatic. He said, but my whole day is very, very, very much structured like anyone else. The difference is that I get on a stage and I say words that someone else wrote. I'm made to look a certain way by directors, cinematographers. He said, But at the end of the day, when all that's gone and the people don't see me, I'm just as no different than they are. So would they want to come and see me if they realized how just regular I am? That I couldn't carry on a more articulated conversation than they could? No, we don't want our heroes to be like us. We want people that we feel are models to be better than us. Why? We have so little appreciation for the uniqueness of our being that we're always making someone else seem better. Well, that's an illusion. The illusion is our schools are there to really teach the kids in ways that will prepare them for the world which they live. Our government's there to assist us in the most efficient way to de-hassle our lives. That the Wall Street is there to create financial incentives and opportunities for the average person equal to corporate interests in its own Wall Street investment houses. That the politicians are honest and they're there as public servants. The religions are there to connect us with our spiritual being and respect all life as being sacred. And you think, what's wrong with this scenario? Wow, that's not the world I live in. Most of the institutions are dysfunctional and people accept them. Most people go through lives that are artificial until one day they wake up and realize, my God, I haven't been living an authentic life. How can you be happy? How can you be whole? How can you be balanced if you're not authentic? At some point, we must be authentic with who we are without looking in a mirror and being angry because we've gotten old or we've gotten wrinkled or we've gotten fat or we've got AIDS or we've got alcohol eating our liver up. We have to be authentic. Who am I? Because if I start with who I am, at least I know what I can do with who I am. Because if I can't get to the point where I know my authentic self, I'm going to continue to live a non-authentic life. And my non-authentic life means I can master something that is not real to me. And how many people work jobs that are brilliant at what they do and yet are dysfunctional in the choices they make? How can you have a person be so good at this and so absolutely wrong at this? Look at the disparity between what people achieve and what they represent as human beings. How could a person be one of the wealthiest people in the world and be a mean, angry person to everyone else around them? Then what good is that money? The person who dies with not a nickel in their pocket, but a wonderful heart and a loving temperament will be remembered. And that legacy will live far beyond the person who died with all the money, but nobody liked. One had an authentic existence, the other didn't. It doesn't mean that money creates disharmony. It does not. It's why we need something. If you need love, you'll never find it. If you need health, you're not going to get it. Whatever you need, you've made more important than who you are. So you've made your needs what's authentic, and you've left yourself out of it. You're in the bleacher, and your needs or your dysfunction is out on the playing field. So you're watching your dysfunctional self each day go through routines and habits and feelings and emotions as if it were real. You've made yourself unreal because you've made yourself incapable of correcting what you're doing out here. You're like a coach of a team that's listening to none of the right plays. Do you understand what I just said? You can't have an artificial self go through life and find any fulfillment because the artificial never connects. There's no authenticity in what it connects with. It's only when you connect with what's authentic that you can identify the authenticity of your own existence. Only through an authentic connection can you change. Because the first tool you need is to identify what is authentic in you. Because anything that's authentic is what balances, but everything that's not authentic imbalances. Your frustration, your anger, your disappointments will always come through what is not authentic. How many times have we seen people who've been so successful and yet so self-destructive, self-sabotaging? Right? And you think, why? Why? You have so much. Why blow it? What did they have? They didn't have that sense of self. They weren't present for their own life. They were a shadow trying to catch themselves. And they lived in that cold, dark world that emanates depression and hopelessness. They disguise it so they can seem functional. They're never happy or complete. It's easy when you're a shadow of who you should be to make inappropriate choices and end up in crisis. What in our life is distorted? Because what's distorted is where you're creating the imbalance. Look at anything that's distorted. Is your health distorted? Are your thoughts distorted? Anything that's distorted must be faced and corrected. Take the distortion out. And part of the way you take the distortion out of life is you correct the image and the illusion of what you thought should be. How many times do we give ourselves an illusion of what happiness should be, or a great job should be, or a relationship should be? But the reality is not going to be that. And then we get disappointed. And then we give up. Okay, if it can't be perfect, I don't want it. And then we watch television or go to the movies or read novels thinking that perfection is over there. What I didn't achieve, someone else did. That's why we're so enamored by other people's lives and so disillusioned by our own. We feel there's so little because we have grown smaller in our life and our choices. The older you get, the fewer choices. And then we compartmentalize. If I'm a woman, less choices. If I'm colored, less choices. If I'm uneducated, less choices. If I don't have money, less choices. Don't have friends, less choices. If I'm getting older, less choices. If I'm diseased, less choices. If I'm overweight, less choices. And if I have addictive behavior, less choices. And then one day we wake up and our lives are tiny little microcosms of what they should be. And yet, in that same human being, you have more potential to live a bigger life. Your life should be lived in a larger way. Let yourself out. Take the corsets off. We're walking around overly constricted by dogmas, rituals, creeds, rules. Everyone's telling us how to live, what to think, what to do. And we live like this. Freedom expands. Fear constricts. Love opens us up. Hatred pulls us down. Without even being aware of it, we live constricted, limited lives and think because we attach with something intellectually, we are what we attach to. You are not. That's just an attachment. How do you respond when an event forces you to interrupt your natural behavior? You're doing something, and now something changes it. How do you react more often than not? Anger, fear, depression, anxiety? Why? In that moment that something interrupts your normal behavior, you're ill prepared of how to cope with it. So we plunge ourselves into the few things we've been allowed to do. We cry, we feel depressed, we get anxious, we take tranquilizers, we numb our feelings, alcohol, various drugs. We overeat, we feel saddened, we feel disappointed. Inappropriate choices. If anything, when something disrupts our normal behavior, we should say, it may not feel good. I may not like what's happened, but the fact that something has got my attention is important, because how often do we not allow ourselves to pay attention? How many parents in this room? Okay? How many times have you asked your kids to do something simple, and they didn't do it? They heard you. Many times, right? Yeah? And then you ask them again. But this time you have to raise your voice a little bit, right? And about the fifth time you finally say, take the damn stuff out. And what are you yelling for? As if the only time they're going to pay attention to you is when you yell. Now, did they not hear you? Or did they hear you and choose not to honor you? So what the real issue is, then those children are not honoring you. Now, they could tell you why they're not going to want to honor you, but the fact is they're not honoring you. So what I want to know is, what do we have to do when routines change? We have to be present for them and stay neutral. When a crisis happens, stay neutral. Let it be what it is and look at it for what has changed. Every change is a crisis, but it's also, according to the Chinese, an opportunity. Look for the crisis and look for the opportunity and say, how do I want to respond to this? I know people that the only time they got smart about their finances is when they were broke. Right? I know people the only time they realized what they shouldn't be doing with their sex life is when they got someone pregnant or they got diseased. Until that time, you couldn't communicate with them because they had like raging hormones, a brain of its own. I'm going this direction. Don't think that way, and they do. Every time we honor an illusion, we dishonor our true self, which in turn creates such an imbalance that radical corrections become necessary. There was a time when women weren't allowed to vote because we were told that women weren't emotionally stable enough to be responsible or held in a responsible position. And even though women could have, going on strike, stopped doing domestic activities, stopped sex, they didn't. It took decades before finally, through the efforts of a small and really outspoken group of women, that women joined up and they got the right to vote. Think of all the illusions that we live with, including the illusions that you are incapable, insufficient, you're not enough to be enough in your own life. Stop believing in illusion. Institutions encase you in illusion, that they will take care of you. They have all the truths. Well, which institution has made it a better world because they were all correct? Which one? If all the religions were right, why do we still have so much hatred and inhumane treatment of one to another in the world? If governments were right, why is it that we are disproportionately taxed and that we do not have the comfort and safety of who we are? Our educational institutions have also this illusion. Just everywhere we live, we're living with illusion that is really not true. I would rather take away all of the illusions and see what I'm dealing with. Because when you take away all your illusions and all you're left with is the bare bone truth, that's where you begin your journey. I may not like the process or the time or commitment to put my act together, but I do know this: when I'm brutally honest and I allow no lies, no deceptions about who I am, what I'm capable of, what I want to be, what I want to feel, what I can share, what I can give, what I can receive, when I start with that, then at least the foundation of my life is solid. Whatever I build upon that foundation of self can only help myself evolve. I can evolve in unlimited ways when I start off with a foundation that's based on truth. I can never evolve when I start off on a foundation that's based on illusion. So I have to first get rid of the illusion of who I am and become real with who I am. And my reality shouldn't be based upon the mistakes I've made, because my mistakes are not who I am. The mistake is what happened when you live by an illusion of who you think you are, and therefore are ill-prepared to deal with all the crises and challenges that come into our lives. I've been given the wrong tools. So if I'm given a basketball to play golf with and I don't do well, I shouldn't beat up on myself and feel depressed and angry because I've got the wrong tools. The poor child that doesn't get the right tools is certainly going to make inappropriate choices in life. So we grow up one day realizing that we're just an extension of all the mistakes that have occurred. So forgive that. Forgive the people, forgive the institutions, forgive everything in your life that's been a part of the illusion that you've become. And look at what you are in reality. Even if no one else will accept you for who you are, as long as you accept you for who you are, that's all you need. Because in the end, you're born alone, you're going to die alone. Everyone else you meet throughout your life, it's hopeful that they'll accept you as you are. And if they don't argue, don't convince, don't try to prove yourself to other people. It'll never work. And part of our frustration is trying to prove to people we deserve their attention, their love, their kindness, their respect. And that's when you start compromising. And that's when you start adapting. How many times have you done things for other people just to get them to like you, to respect you? Instead of saying, this is who I am. Like me and respect me because I know who I am, I'm honoring myself, and I honor everyone in the process. When we do that, there's no more conflict, and there's balance. Where there's balance, there's harmony. And where there's harmony, there is bliss. And in bliss, there's no need to sublimate. And when you're not sublimating, then there's no alcoholism, there's no drug addiction, there's no gambling, there's none of the things that we're now doing, stating these are diseases. They're not diseases. How they manifest in the body frequently can be a disease, but that's not the cause. Thank you very much.